everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk J70 Worlds. We're going to give everybody a few seconds to kind of filter in. It looks as though we have a bunch of people piling into the waiting room and slowly getting filtered into this. But we are lucky to be joined by two North Sales J70 experts. Eric Doyle, he's used to be a Southern California guy, recently decided that he enjoyed the cold weather, so he moved to northern Minnesota to take in some winters, but he is well known here in the SoCal area. And we're also joined by Zeke Horwitz, Annapolis native, J22 world champ, Viper world champ. Eric, we don't see you, but can we hear you? Are you there?
You got me? Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you. Eric is there's really bad Wi-Fi in Minnesota. So we
just got it last month.
We decided that we're not going to see him, but you can hear him. So if you can't see Eric, it's because of bad Wi-Fi. Zeke, can we hear you? Do you have Wi-Fi there in Annapolis?
Yeah, it's been working okay. We're here in the 21st century in Annapolis. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I hear you great, man. Thanks. Eric, just turn your video off. It doesn't work.
We know what Eric looks like.
So this past weekend, we had an incredible event, probably the nicest.
There's a picture in the middle. It's a picture.
We probably had the nicest 4 consecutive days I've ever seen here in Marina Del Rey. Here's a great picture of Zeke and his team leading to the top mark. Zeke, tell us a little bit about your weekend and your experience at the PreWorlds.
Well, you said it, man. It was 4 of the nicest days of sailing I think anyone's had anywhere, really. And it's been, a year and a half or 2 years of people talking about how it's never more than 8 knots in Marina Del Rey, and there's this marine layer, fog, and all this gross. It's cold and big waves. And anytime we go out there, we seem to have just gorgeous, sunny, nice 10 to 20 knots, nice waves, dolphins jumping everywhere. So it was gorgeous. The 2 practice days were windy, right out of the west, big waves with chop kind of on the surface. And the race days over the weekend didn't disappoint either. It was really, really beautiful. We got 40-some boats out there. It was really nice to have Mark Foster, who's just an absolute world-class PRO with his great race committee, most of whom will be with him for the Worlds. So it was a good little practice run to see how they were going to run things, and they're going to run them square and fair and with eagle eyes from the committee boat. We had multiple general recalls and U flags, black flags, and the whole deal. So those guys, we can count on them for really perfect racing. And certainly for those who haven't sailed in rough seas, big waves, or chop, it seems like we're going to have that. It's certainly not a flat water venue. All the modes are needed, both upwind and downwind. You need a high mode, you need a low mode, you need a steer through waves and chop wood mode. And same for downwind. All the modes are needed: surfing, winging, planing at times. Vince Brune told us when we get out there, we will never plane in Marina Del Rey. That's a direct quote from Vince Brune.
That was surfing. It wasn't really planing. So.
I definitely watched plenty of teams planing around me as we were out on the water going downwind.
Me too.
There is planing. But anyway, it was just fantastic to be out there. Great hospitality at the club. We all have a lot to look forward to for the Worlds coming up.
Sweet. And Eric, you had the great pleasure of watching grass grow from the coach boat, but it did get exciting at times. What did you see from the coach boat, and give us your perspective on what was working, and kind of walk us through your thoughts on setup.
Yeah, you're right. It was a great weekend. It was more fun to watch than I thought it would be because we had nice wind. It's very good. We did a few days of training ahead of time, and I caught some photos of what we think the typical conditions are going to be. This photo is got some good solid points of a nice setup, going upwind, not a lot of wind yet. We can see with the Travelers up, the boom is on the low side of the boom is just above center line, which is good. The Travelers up, it's not too high. You get it too high, it just gets very draggy, and you tend to get stuck in a high mode. So this is where the wind is just picked up a little bit, but it's very nice. Everybody's hiking. It's pretty flat water, as you can see right there. We're probably going to see this a lot on the first beats. where you can in-haul the jib clew, you know, all the way to the cabin top, very tight in there. If the picture were expanded a little bit, you could look up, and I'm sure that the leach of the jib would be at the middle mark on the spreader, or perhaps even just a little bit tighter. Full flow all the time in this, but pretty snug. Probably in the puffs it comes on a little bit. You're sheeted pretty hard, and pretty good in-haul on as well. Probably maximum in this condition. What I really like about this is the helmsman's been trained to put the hiking stick on his leg. You know, there's a couple ways to do it. You can either frying pan it on the deck or just on the leg, so that we're not steering too much. We can minimal steering movements in this condition. The longer you can hold the rudder steady, and we drive the boat with the heel angle, either with the crew weight or the main sheet tension or the traveler. That's when the rudder is most effective. The boat's going to be in balance going along. The boat has nice heel angle. A lot of us, you know, have instruments now that can handle that, and this boat looks to be in perfect trim. And one thing that I really like about this photo is that the crew has been very conscientious, and they've taken the jib halyard to the rail with them. They've got it up there, and they're poised. They're ready to do any kind of change. If a lull comes, they can pop it out of the cleat, ease it down. The whole jib gets fuller. That kind of effectively drops the jib down and moves the lead aft. So you might have to pull the sheet on a little bit. And likewise, if it's windy, he's got it in his hand. He doesn't have to lean in the boat. You know, we want to keep the boat flat. He can tighten it up. You know, it's quite puffy out there, and there's probably lots of opportunities for small gains. It's going to be long courses, and once you get off the starting line, very important, holding lanes and going very, very fast. A couple of lengths here and there can be the difference at the top mark with a lot of boats, whether you cross or duck or have to do extra tacks, and tacks are quite expensive. So this is a very nice setup right here.
You know, one thing, just to jump in real quick, Alex, but something you just said that was really good, Eric, I thought was, you know, talking about the jib halyard, helping you get through those transitions of puffs and lulls. And it's not just the jib halyard, it's certainly everything. But one thing we've noticed from sailing out there a few times, it does seem like on these really long, just sort of half-mile drag races, there are really localized, seemingly localized veins of pressure that come down to a boat that might be only 4 boat lengths away, and they just peel off and they're higher, faster for a little bit. Then they come back down, and it's really seemingly really imperative that anytime you have that little bit of extra pressure, you are going as high and as fast as you can while it's your moment, and that when it goes away and the other boats have it, you're surviving that lull, often in some chop, better than everybody else. And that seems to be where the fastest teams are getting away and getting that extra half boat length for a cross. So those transitions you're talking about are absolutely critical.
Yeah, that's a pretty unique Southern California thing. It's good to bring that up, Zeke. Yeah, the boats will be sailing along, and suddenly you split apart, and then you might just come back together, and you don't see anything on the water. You don't see any reason for it, but it's not that uncommon to have that happen, you know, pretty regularly. I took this picture on Sunday morning. There was a little more of a delay for the breeze. Very, very typical day that was a little bit lighter in the morning. This is Jim Morrell, Team Budget Marine. We got soft wind. You can see in the boat, checking out, just barely hiking, just enough to get us out. So we're looking for max power out of the whole sail plan. We're trying to get the boys up on the rail. We're trying to hike out, but at the same time, we're trying to keep the heel the same. You know, so we've got probably at our base setting, or maybe we ease just a little bit. Here you can see the travelers all the way to weather. We're trying to get because we can't sheet quite as hard. The boom looks nice. It's just above center line. Again, it's not stalled. They're sheeted pretty firm on both sails because it's still relatively flat. Generally, there's very, very little wind in Southern California overnight. So in the morning you wake up, it's very flat. There's very little wind. Usually, races aren't going to start till 12:30 because before that, it's kind of hopeless to try and start, or you're going to wait around. So you might as well wait till 12:30. They've got nice heel angle. You know, it's nice that we all have, or most of us have instruments that will show the heel angle. You know, we're looking to be paying attention to that. If a lull comes, the heel starts getting down near 8 degrees of heel, we got to start leaning in, you know. And as it gets up, you know, we want to shoot 8 to 12. And one comment I did have from some skippers were, gosh, when it got windy in the afternoon, I really felt like the boat was heeling too much. And you know, one thing I remember from sailing in choppy conditions on big boats like far 40s and stuff, when it gets really choppy and you know, you've got instruments and you've got target boat speeds, you know, you just got to keep the boat going fast. And if you're on I remember on far 40s, if the target speed was like 6.5, you wanted that to be your bottom speed. So you leaned on the boat, you made it go really fast. And a lot of times you were going 7.2, and then you hit 3 of these big waves, bam, bam, and the boat slowed down to the target speed. And we just did anything we could to keep the boat from pounding, very similar to J70, whatever you can do. Sometimes it's going to happen. There's nothing the helmsman can do. You're just going to slam through the waves, but you better hit them going fast. And that might take a little bit more heel. But if more heel is less pounding, that's good. And then in the flat spots, as flat as you can be and pointing up and making those gains when you can. But we got to hit those waves with a lot of speed. And it might be a little bit more heel, more like 15, maybe 20, 22 degrees of heel when it's really windy. So that's a pretty good summary of this slide.
Yeah, and if for those of you guys who made it here for the pre-worlds, we haven't seen anything yet. The swells are coming next week. We'll talk about that later. But certainly, you know, Zeke, this whole weekend was kind of a mind trip in terms of rig setting. You know, what we learned on our boat is the rig has to be tight enough to be able to handle the chop and be able to put the bow down without heeling the boat over too much. I know we came in on Saturday and our rig was at 8 and 8, which I'm like, you know, last time I was 8 and 8 was in this picture behind me in San Francisco Bay, and you can see what was happening there. So that was a mind trip to be that tight on the rig, but it really was important to be tight so you could hike the boat flat, keep the bow down, hit the waves at full speed. Zeke, why don't you talk about, you know, as the breeze builds in a class where you can't adjust the shrouds during the race, which is another topic, but what happens when you get caught loose? What do you do? How do you combat that in your boat?
Yeah, well, you're right that it's a total mind trick. And I think a couple things stick out to me in regattas like we're about to go to where there's big fleets. We always talk about it's better to set up for the lulls than it is to set up for the puffs. And I think that as the fleet gets bigger, that becomes more important because as more boats get together, the wind that we all feel is lighter. And as more boats get together, the chop that we all feel is much, much more. So think about times, you know, coming off the start, if you don't have a great start, you probably want a little more power rather than a little less power. Coming around the leeward gate, when you have to go sail back up through the water that 65 J70s just sailed through, you're going to look for more power, I think, more of the time. So it's balancing that with this weather pattern that's pretty normal for this venue, which has the breeze building throughout the day and building pretty rapidly. So you sort of have to guess a little bit on how quick the breeze is going to come up. Do you really want to set up for the first beat, what you see right there, even though you think it's going to be 5 or 6 knots more by the time you get to the top mark? It's a really delicate kind of guessing game that you got to play. And I bet you, while you were up 9 and 9 in one of those races, my team was up 1 and 1 because we weren't hedging at all the way that you guys were, maybe. So it's important to figure out what are the things we can do to get through the condition if our rig is not perfect, because I think we're going to spend more time out of perfect rig tune than in it. So a lot of these things are pretty basic, but one thing that we really took away and learned this weekend was that as the breeze comes up, so does the chop, and you can't get through the chop in a high mode. And if you're soft on the rig, it's really difficult to be able to put the bow down enough to get through the chop without flipping over too much and heeling more than that 20 degrees Eric is talking about. So how do we accomplish that? And for us, it seemed like the answer was, of course, more and more backstay. But as you pull more backstay on with the rig loose, you're going to overbend the main quickly and it goes inside out. And I kind of made a joke about this earlier, but it turns out that there's this piece of rigging we have called a Cunningham. And I think it's pretty important. Not something we've played with a lot when conditions are not changing so much, but The more you pull the Cunningham on, it takes those overbend wrinkles out, and it allows you to pull more backstay on, which is really important when you're caught overpowered and needing to press and get the bow down. So Cunningham and outhaul are kind of, things that we don't often think about. We tend to overcomplicate what else we can do. Don't forget to play your Cunningham and outhaul when you're out of rig tune. And the other one is your jib sheet. We all in-haul a lot, and it's really important to in-haul our jib when we need power. And most fast teams kind of have their jib trimmer leaning on the weather sheet and kind of pulling down a little bit in the lulls, easing it in the puffs. And I think it's important that if you ease for a puff and find yourself not pulling it back on, it's probably because you're really overpowered. And when that happens, it probably is necessary to trim your leeward sheet a little bit more, leaving the weather sheet off and flattening the jib to let you press to get through that.
Yeah, great points. And I think, a lot of people have called me early this week, wondering, hey, I'm not in-hauling at all. If your rig is soft, it's really hard to in-haul, period. When your boat is balanced and set up correctly, you, like in the picture before, maybe not that extremely far in, but the boat wants the in-haul. The sail wants to be in-hauled. So if you get caught out of whack, one of the telltale signs of being out of whack is the fact that you can't in-haul as much. Eric, downwind surfing was so important. You and I talked on the phone after, and we decided the 6 most important parts of the race is the last 2 minutes to the start, the first 2 minutes after the start. And we said, arguably the first 2 minutes out from the weather mark, get the kite up and get it ripping. What were some of the good teams doing to get the kite going and get the boat just lively and on a plane and off to the races?
Yeah, we had some big waves and some big puffs, and the most important thing was just that your team is prepared, and it's a full team effort. From the back to the front. The helmsman has to put the boat on the right angle. The main trimmer has to let the traveler down and get the main just right. The kite has got to go up as fast as possible with the pole going all the way out, and it fill as with just one pop. A lot of times we get that, but a lot of times the kite luffs a couple of times, and you think, oh well, it's no big deal. I trimmed it and it got. But the guys who could get the boat popped and going and on a wave, and right away everybody tuned in. With the forward crew having the Vang in his hand and getting the boat going as fast as possible, immediately it paid big gains, big gains. If it's a little bit windier and you got to put the bow up to get it going, the Vang's got to come off, the main sheet comes on, and then once the boat gets ripping, start slowing down a little bit, you can start pulling the Vang on for power. But, and it's very hard, I've been there, I've done the front, and you want to start cleaning up right away and getting ready for something. But I think it's just make sure the jib is trimmed perfect, make sure you're ready for a jibe, but worry about the halyard and all that other stuff later. Get the weight just right, and that's if it's surfing. And then right away, like we said, start pumping. And the biggest problem was the traffic. You're in the middle of the fleet, figure out what to do and have a plan. A lot of times there were big gains to be made by jibing. If it was windy enough, it was where the wind was going. I watched one run to the finish, and the leaders just planed off to the right corner. They rounded in a nice big puff, and off they were. They were surfing. They're on their way. Bruno and his team rounded about 10th, and they were in the traffic, in the mix, but up the beat, the right side had a lot of power and good pressure and a shift, so they just jibed right away. Went under the fleet. This was windy. Probably not going to do if it's light, but it was windy. But they got the boat surfing, and they went all the way to the left side. And then Jim Morrell came around. He was about 12th. Again, in the mix now. There's lots of waves. It's a big problem. But the problem was the wind started dying when he got there. And they were like, I don't think we're going to plane. And they made the call to just wing the kite, and they went straight at the line. One very important thing to do before the start, the wind often shifts and it's not aligned with the swell on one jibe, is figure out which jibe the boat is on where the swell is dead behind you. And that one had happened to be where they were on fourth jibe. So I'm sorry, they wung the main right away. They set the kite, threw the main over. They were aimed right at the finish line, swell going right behind them. They went right down the middle. Both of them passed like 10 boats. Bruno got second. The guys in the right corner ran out of wind. The wind died. They jibed to come planing back. They couldn't plane. They sailed all that extra distance, which, you know, when they rounded in the puff, it was probably the thing to do, you know, but they ran out of wind. The Bruno and the guys way out in the right corner towards Malibu. They came big pressure. They came planing back. They finished third. You know, Jim finished like fifth. So the likely to have lots of legs where you can wing. I'm gonna hope for you guys that there's some planing, because there's gonna be big waves and a lot of good surfing, but don't count on it. But be very cognizant of where the wind is. Think about the beat. Was there better pressure on the left upwind? Okay, we want to go straight and get into the or stay in the pressure, you know. And if it gets light enough and we can't surf, we can't plane, but we can wing, there's a lot of that 10 to 12. Get the wind behind the waves straight behind you so you can aim right at the mark. Just perfect VMG.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be great surfing on the beach. I know that, and I hope my buddy Pat Powell brings his boards, because it's going to be pretty good.
Well, if you decide to actually come and sail instead of go surfing, Alex, I think Eric's nailing it, and we sort of like added a new mode to the downwind, which is just surf no matter what direction it takes you, because a lot of times it is right on the edge of if it's displacement or winging or lazy planing. And I think the answer is just sail the angle where your boat will surf the longest. And when you catch one of these big waves, steer down the wave, carve down the wave, just like Alex would on his surfboard, and stay on it. If even that means you have to throw the main, if you were winging and now you got to throw the main and come out to conventional, do that, or vice versa. If you're surfing down the wave and the main's in the middle of the boat, wants to cross sides, just let it go. Whatever angle you have to sail to surf these swells, I think is the right thing to do.
Yeah, and the crew's got to be on their toes, right? They, you know, like you said,
All the time, every second.
The tactician, you know, they need to be there to make a decision. Okay, we talking about the veins of pressure, right? How do you connect the veins of pressure with the swell? And it's a lot of moding and craziness, and it'll be equally as fun with more boats and bigger waves, and hopefully the same amount of wind next week. But I'm going to hold my breath on the wind. Zeke, you snaked us like 5 times on the start because I did a really bad job of getting our boat in positions. Why don't you walk us through sort of your thought process on these bigger fleet starts? Obviously, you've done a lot of it with the J22s and the Vipers.
Yeah, well, I think, we've probably all gone through a year or almost 2 years now, it feels like, of probably sailing in smaller fleets. So when we get into these bigger fleets, I think starting strategy definitely changes up a little bit. And I think the most important thing is that, especially when the wind is light and the blob of boats gets together, the wind gets even lighter, and it's in kind of an apparent left shift in the starting area. Just like, because the wind is lighter, your angle you think you're going to sail to the line isn't quite there. So the first thing is just making practice runs at the line, which you're often going to do while there's lots of boats around. We did a couple practice runs, just 5 minutes before the first warning signal, and everybody's there. They're all blocking the breeze. So the breeze is light and terrible, and we're always like 20 meters off the line when we think we're going to be on it, because your angle is so much lower trying to approach in a big fleet. So that's a really important thing. And then with this venue, even when it's light, there's a lot of swell, a lot of chop, and getting down speed when you're trying to do a high kill in the starting area in the last minute. You can never get going again sometimes if you do too much of a high kill. So I would definitely encourage folks to do a lot of slow speed, just holding position type of practice in the swell, and get a feel for that. And I think that the wind is fairly predictable. The direction wise, there's not huge shifts, it doesn't seem. Mark Foster is freaking on it, and every time, I think with the general recalls, I think there were maybe 9 or 10 starts. I had one of them where I think the pin was 4 degrees favored. Every other one, it was spot on with the breeze direction. So I think it all kind of comes down to what side of the course you want to go to, translating into the favored side of the line, and just thinking about your escape. I think we a lot of times see in 60 to 90, 100 boat fleets, the guys who kind of get a decent start in the, pseudo front row, they're clear, but they're really working hard to try to stay there for the first 5 minutes off the line, oftentimes find themselves behind the guys who get flushed and can escape and get out to a side and clear water. So I think as soon as the gun goes off, whatever start you had, whether it's front row and punched or third row and scrambling, your biggest focus needs to be, where's the escape? Where's the clearest water, clearest air in the direction I want to go, and get there as your top priority.
Yeah, the budget Marine guys in race 1 or race 2, they didn't lay the pin. They jibed out, ducked the fleet, sailed to the right corner, tacked, and was second at the top mark. And
well, you know who was first at the top mark was my team, who was like second and a half-ish row up at the boat end and tacked out to the right just on top of those guys. And, the right filled in, and we were over there in clear water, and all these guys who started in front row, but they were just working so hard against each other to hold that lane. They're all going a little higher and slower, trying to pinch each other off. They're on the front of the fence of the big 60 boat fleet. They're not going as fast as the boats that get flushed, and maybe they're 2 boat lengths behind at the start, but you make that up pretty quickly by sailing in clear air and water.
Yeah, having raced here in Southern California, you look at a lot of pictures, and the guys who can kind of start, go straight for 2 minutes and tack onto port, you see these pictures of 40 boats on port tack heading towards the right. But definitely distinguishing which end of the line you like for when you tack onto port. Do you like the breeze more on the left? Is it more from the left or more from the right? That's a really big thing. So all great points. So transitioning now to the Worlds, we're adding more boats. Looks like the weather is going to turn more into typical Southern California conditions. Like the flow offshore is starting to increase every single day, which means we could find ourselves in some Catalina Eddy situations. And like Eric alluded to before, every day pretty much starts the same here in Southern California, with very light air or no air at all. And then it's how does the breeze build and where does it settle? So Eric, why don't you talk about the Catalina Eddy? What is it and what can people expect?
Yeah, it's too bad I'm a little technologically challenged. I couldn't pull a map up and make it happen. But there's an island just off of Los Angeles, Catalina, which gives the name of the Eddy. We just had a little different weather pattern, like the guys who just did the Transpac from LA to Hawaii. It was a very great year for them. There's a high in the Pacific North that was quite far north, and it was very windy. Normally you want to avoid that, so you go quite far south. These guys went straight across. They were never more than 50, 80 miles from the rum line, and some years you're 200 or 300. So it was a strange pattern that stayed. It was weak low pressure offshore, and that allowed the sea breeze to come in nicely and be enhanced with the thermal effect from the shore. Typical conditions are normally north of LA, offshore, 20, 30 miles. There's very, very strong winds. It has set up. You can go on sail flow and look at the forecast charts for this weekend. You'll see the circulation around, generally in or on top of Catalina. So it will wrap around and come back up the coast at night. So it's quite southerly in the morning when we wake up. It's predicted very strong for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Beyond that, who knows? Maybe you guys will get lucky and it won't be established and it'll be windy again. But generally it comes in. So we wake up in the morning and it's quite southerly, very flat, very light. Oftentimes we get to the race course at 11:30, 12 o'clock. The wind is 180, 220, something like that. Generally, when I see that in Marina Del Rey, I'm looking hard at the left because the wind has circulated around the south side of Catalina and is left, and there's generally pressure there. As the day goes along, it will switch, it will rotate to the right, and if we start maybe the second race and the wind is 240-ish, somewhere in there, we're probably going to see oscillating shifts. We'll probably be able to go up the middle, be able to just play the shifts that you see. And then later in the day, he sets a race course. Maybe, I don't know how many of are scheduled, but he ran 3 this past weekend, and there might be some days where you have to make up races, and it's later in the day, 3:30, something like that. We see 2:45, something to the right of that. The right is more than often than not better. It's a lot stronger. There's shifts. We saw quite a bit of that later in the day. And that's a pretty typical Southern California day. You know, first race, flat, light, southerly, 8 to 10. Next race, 10 to 12, a little bit more to the right. And then hopefully it picks up. You get some nice surfs on these big waves that are coming. And then look for pressure and shift right. Not always. There were a lot of races. Sunday, the final 2 races were quite breezy. And it was pretty strong to be left. And like Alex said, you see that a lot here. You find a good lane to whether you want to be all the way left, but you're on port tack, taking advantage of that. And if you're having a beer there, Alex, that's good, man. It's almost 5 o'clock, right? Okay. Oh, one other thing I like to mention is generally in Marina Del Rey, the puffs come from windward to leeward. It's not like they really fill from the side. They might when it's light. A lot of times they fill from the left, there's more pressure, but they come down the course. So it's very important to start and take the line bias because you're going to get the puff first. And he who gets the puff first, regardless of what happens, he's going to gain. You know, and you'll often see the guy on your lee bow, if he's either to the right or the left, you look at him and gosh, he's pointing higher than we are. How come we're not pointing? We've got a problem. The wind's heading. Well, no, the wind's not heading. Look at your compass. It's probably the same. He's gotten a puff first, and his bow is going to go up 3, 4, maybe 5 degrees. So he's higher than you, and he's making a gain. And then you get the puff, and you stay up for a little bit too. Now you can live off of him for a little bit, but that generally happens progressively up the beat, and he gains. So we don't want that to happen on the first beat. So Mark's been doing a nice job of setting the courses pretty square. But look for a shift in a 65 boat fleet. Pretty important to take the line bias, especially if it's on the direction that it's biased toward the direction you want to go up the beat.
Yeah. I see you got some bullets here on the current, Eric, which I think is when the water moves. And it turns out it moves fast up there, man, especially when we're a mile and a half out in the ocean. It's a pretty serious factor for the ley line. There were a lot of teams that tacked on what they thought was the ley line and came up way, way short, and it created some carnage there at the World. So I think there was almost a full knot of right to left current up by the weather mark, and you couple that with, some 15 or 20 foot swells. It seems like that's how big some of those are.
I think they're bigger.
It can create a bit of a mess. So there's a lot of opportunity to gain and a lot of opportunity to lose playing the current and hitting the ley lines right at the top.
Yeah, and this week, I put this slide in here. Down here is this hurricane that's brewing off the coast of Baja, and we haven't seen this yet. But sometimes when the swell is big from the south, the current actually starts running up the beach from south to north along the coast. So you might see some south to north current at the bottom and then some north to south at the top. And the sea state's going to get worse. It's going to be crazy. And it's going to be fun sailing as long as the wind is there. You can see this up here is what normally is the flow that goes down the coast and will establish and connect with the Southern California wind. And this will create the eddy. When the predominant wind off the coast doesn't connect with the Southern California, that's when we see really strong thermals. And then when it does connect, it creates the Catalina Eddy. So it's going to be a fun week. I know I'm really looking forward to it. Zeke, I know you're really looking forward to spending 8 or 9 more days here in beautiful Los Angeles, California. And Eric, what days are you going to be here? Are you going to be around? What's your deal?
I'm going to watch you guys Tuesday and Wednesday, and then I'm going down to Newport Beach, which hard to believe is even lighter than Santa Monica Bay. Racing my starboat, having lots of fun down there with my bros while you guys bash each other at the Worlds.
Yeah, it'll be great. And if any of you guys have any questions, feel free to come up to any of us. Like I said, Eric will be on the water on Tuesday during the practice race. If you feel like you need some help with your setup, come by. He'll take a look at you, get you all set up. One little service plug, we will be having some service. So if you tear a spinnaker, you put a hole in your main somehow, small hole, we can do some small repairs there on site. So give us a call and we'll come take care of you. Boys, any last words? Eric, we can't even see you, man. The lights are off. You're done. You're about to go to bed there in Minnesota. Any last words, boys?
I don't know. Do we want to? Do we think this is dragging, or we can address some of these questions that we had there on the
Here we go.
on the list?
When will you upload the recorded session on the YouTube? It's typically, it takes a few hours, so probably by tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. East Coast time, you should be able to find it. We did have a question from Patrick Powell. Do we prefer Stella or Coors Light? Eric and I are split.
I can be bribed with Stella for sure.
I prefer Coors Light. Zeke, what do you prefer?
I'm a tequila man myself.
Hey, all right, I can get down with that.
There we go.
But yeah, I think we're good. I think
that's great. I would just add, we're easy to find via cell phone and email as well. And please, we invite you if there's anything that we can do to help you in the next week or so before or during. Please call us, email us. We're really looking forward to seeing all you guys at the Worlds and love to help you in any way that we can.
Cool. All right, guys, take care and we'll talk to you soon.